I met Bird when I was 14 years old at a club in Detroit. Well, actually, it was the Greystone Ballroom where they had concerts. And they had concerts there, and young people could get in because they didn't serve alcohol. And so it was great. And that's the first time I heard Charlie Parker in person. And this tenor saxophone player, Billy Mitchell, his name was, told Bird that there was three kids that sang his music. And at that time, I was singing with Skeeter Spite and Leroy Mitchell, who were two African American kids. And, I wanted to sing the music, and I found them at this little club in downtown Detroit, where all the kids hung out, and I wanted to sing with them, and I told them that I sang Bird, and I loved Bird, and so they took me in. And so we had a little trio, Skeeter, Mitch, and Jean. My nickname was Jean because Sheila was too weird at the time. So that was my real name, but I didn't use it. I used Jean or Jeannie. But anyway, we got up, and Bird came over and met us. Billy Mitchell introduced us, and then Bird went back after the break, and he played one tune, and then after the tune, he said, I got a couple of kids in here that sing my music, and I'd like to invite them up to sing. So me and Mitch and Skeeter, the guys that I sang with, we were looking all around. Oh my, one wonder who that is. Oh, that must be fantastic. And we were all excited to hear somebody sing Bird. And he said, no. So Bird said, no, you three, pointing at us. And I said, oh my God. So we got up. I can't remember what we sang. It might have been Barbados that they wrote lyrics to and I wrote lyrics to, or it might have been Confirmation that they wrote lyrics to. So I don't know. But it was one of those tunes. It was a Bird tune, I know that. And afterwards, Bird came over at the break, and he looked at me and he said, he thanked us all. He thought and Skeeter Spite was still is in my ears, the greatest scat singer I ever heard. I have still not heard anybody that scatted as great as Skeeter Spite. And Bird came over, and he said, you kids were wonderful. And then he looked at me and he said, and kid, you got $1 million ears. I had no clue what that meant. $1 million ears? What is that? So years later, I went to Birdland with a friend of mine. She knew Bird quite well, and she said she was going up to hear Bird, and would I like to come along? And I had just moved from Detroit, because my boyfriend at the time in Detroit was Frank Foster, but he went into the Army. And when he went into the Army, I moved to Detroit because I wanted to be around Bird's music. So I went to the Birdland with her. She invited me, and I went with her. And so Bird was happy to see her, and he, gave her a hug and a kiss. And then he looked over and he saw me. He said, and this is several years later, Michael, he said, you're the kid with $1 million ears. He remembered me. And I said, oh my God. But we became friends. We became very good.
I learned about Bird pretty early on. I was probably 14 years old when somebody told me about Charlie Parker. And I put a nickel in the jukebox and heard Tico Tico. That was the first Bird record I ever heard. And immediately it resonated with me. Immediately. I just knew that whoever this is, he's very special, and this is the way it should go. I knew also that what you're supposed to do is have this kind of technique, be this fluent in terms of long musical sentences, have this kind of linear logic, if you will, but have your own notes. And I knew that at 14. This is the way you do it. I never would have used a term like linear logic, because at 14 I didn't know what that meant. But I did know what logic was, and Bird's made sense to me. He's playing a lot of notes, but they're all making sense. I had heard players and saxophone players and other musicians play a lot of notes, but a lot of it would be nonsensical. But Bird was not, it was just total, like the Fibonacci code, like the golden mean. It was just this perfect unfolding of linear logic, if you will. Made perfect sense. I understood it even before I knew what it was, because I knew nothing about harmony or theory at that time. I just knew that this is making sense, and I had to learn how to do that.
I mean, it was thrilling on record, and then you'd go and see him in person, and it would be, God, you'd almost pass out from the excitement. Hearing and seeing Charlie Parker play was the greatest gift that I've ever been given, aside from the birth of my daughter. Those are the two things, and Charlie Parker is right up there on top.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable, Michael, to see Bird play. You wouldn't believe it. You say, oh my God, where is this all coming from? And all over the place, but with heart and soul. It wasn't just like showing off by playing a lot of fast notes. Every note had the pure soul and depth. It had pure soul and depth. I mean, such depth, every note. And I could hear every note. And my skin used to crawl. That's how thrilling it was.
I was playing in Joe Timer's band as sort of their 21-year-old mascot, crazy French horn player trying to play jazz. And they had me come and sit in with them. And Joe Timer's wife, who was also named Joe, she was named Joe Matee. And she came by my basement apartment where everybody used to come to hang out and have jam sessions and play. And she said, I'm going down to hear Bird. She said, come with me. You have to meet him. He said, he's a beautiful cat. I said, wow. So I went there, and the best 3 pages, I think, of my first book, Vibrations, are certainly among them are the description of hearing Charlie Parker for the first time, then going backstage and meeting him. I had on what were called canoe shoes, which are those sort of like slippers with the zipper, kind of El Funkatissimo, especially back then. He said, man, those are some crazy shoes. I said, well, I use those. I'm a gym teacher part-time. He said, oh, my kids. And he started talking all about his kids and their gym teachers and sports. And he was just like this amazing, warm, wonderful guy. And I think when he saw I was appreciative of what he was doing, he said, you got to meet some of the cats in the band. And he invited Kenny Dorham, whom I ended up recording with later on. One of the highlights of my life as a horn player and a musician. But it was just so wonderful to be with him. And then he came down to my basement apartment and just to hang out. And we had so much fun. It was just so wonderful to be with him. And he knew so much about music and art and painting and poetry, and also gave all of us who were there some terrific advice and encouragement. All of those people that we now think of as icons and everything were so different and gracious. And by different, I mean they had their own personality. Everybody has their own personality until it's talked out of them. Lester Young was famous for that. He said, man, he said, tell your story. And when you heard someone play, you knew it was them.
I learned about Bird pretty early on. I was probably 14 years old when somebody told me about Charlie Parker. And I put a nickel in the jukebox and heard Tico Tico. That was the first Bird record I ever heard. And immediately it resonated with me. Immediately. I just knew that whoever this is, he's very special, and this is the way it should go. I knew also that what you're supposed to do is have this kind of technique, be this fluent in terms of long musical sentences, have this kind of linear logic, if you will, but have your own notes. And I knew that at 14. This is the way you do it. I never would have used a term like linear logic, because at 14 I didn't know what that meant. But I did know what logic was, and Bird's made sense to me. He's playing a lot of notes, but they're all making sense. I had heard players and saxophone players and other musicians play a lot of notes, but a lot of it would be nonsensical. But Bird was not, it was just total, like the Fibonacci code, like the golden mean. It was just this perfect unfolding of linear logic, if you will. Made perfect sense. I understood it even before I knew what it was, because I knew nothing about harmony or theory at that time. I just knew that this is making sense, and I had to learn how to do that. And how I heard Bird. It was at a ballroom in Detroit. He didn't show up the first night. He was supposed to be at this ballroom for 3 nights. The first night he did not show up. So here it is Saturday night, and everyone is wondering, is Bird going to show? All of a sudden I see throngs of people rush over to a certain area of the room. So I rush over there with them, and as I made my way through the crowd, I hear our people circling Charlie Parker's right in the middle of this big circle, and he's right on the dance floor, and he's getting his horn out, and he just does a fast scale, really fast and clean, and that was it. And then he got on the bandstand and started playing. So that was the first time I heard Charlie Parker, and it was spectacular. Everything that you have ever heard about Charlie Parker is exactly true, and maybe even more, because when you see him in person, you really are aware by this man's demeanor and his deportment and all of this animal magnetism that's coming out of Charlie Parker's persona. You could cut it with a knife. It was so thick. It was really there. And so what you hear from people when they say that Bird had this almost magnetic quality where people were drawn to him, it's actually true. It really is. And I saw that, which is really, to see that is very interesting. And I knew at that early age this was different than other people, some kind of way. And I thought about that through the years. The only thing I can think of, the closest thing that I could to say to you that would maybe describe what I meant was Charlie Parker, even though he's in a room full of people that are really looking at him, that he's not changing anything about the way he's behaving. He looks like he's doing and acting the same way he would act if he were at home by himself, with nobody there. And that's kind of the way he looked, even though he's not. There are people, a lot of people are just staring at him. And so that, when you see people that way, it's almost they're so natural and almost unaffected that it's actually startling in a way. And you won't know what to call that. And now when I think about it, is that he's totally, he was a man that seemed to be totally at peace with everything around him. How he talked, how he walked, how he listened to other people, and then how he responded. It seems like he just controlled the moment without being overbearing or loud or any of that, because he wasn't that. There was just an aura of regality, almost aristocratic around him, without him actually trying for any of it. He just was. And that was what was almost magnetic about it.
One of the last times, not the last time, but one of the last times I saw Bird, he brought me 2 recordings. Right the spring, Stravinsky, he said, I want you to hear this. And Bela Bartok, Theme and 4 Variations. He had both of these LPs under his arm, and he wanted me to hear them. because he felt that I would get something out of him, and he was absolutely right, you know? So he was looking for other outlets for his wonderful music. Yeah, it's too bad that he had the cunning, baffling, powerful disease of drug addiction and alcoholism. You know, it killed him. 34 years old he was when he died, and he looked like he was in his 60s. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget seeing him in his casket. And I remember touching his hand and saying, "All these incredible hands, what wonderful, beautiful sounds they made. So beautiful, so wonderful." And now he's gone.
Bird is still relevant. That's the main event. He's been gone for a long time now, and but his talent and his influence is still here, and he's still relevant because he did so many things well. And earlier we were talking about all of this craft and art, inspiration, and technique, and Bird exemplified the balance of those things. He had excellent, just beautiful technique, but he was just a great artist, great intellect, bigger than life, and did so many things well so early on. You know, he was a virtuoso, yet still the technique didn't outweigh the emotionality or the feeling. He had great feeling, he had humor, intellect, and great musicality, sensitivity. He had all of those things, but he had great technique and craft, and he was always very emotional. Mingus made a statement once where he said that Bird was so expressive that when he played, if a woman walked across the room, you would be able to know what color dress she had on. You know, now that's a little bit of a stretch, but he was trying to make a point. Bird was that expressive. So here's a person who has all this technique and craft, and yet and still he's able to express so many things, so many dimensions of the human condition. For me, the Bird is to be used as an ideal. For everybody else. It is not that you imitate him or Xerox him, but you're supposed to have his high level, his standards of excellency, to strive for that, to have great technique and craft, and be this world thinker, and to have depth and be able to portray all of the human conditions: sadness, great ecstasy, mystery, eroticism, agape, eros, all of the things that humans are able to feel, and be able to be, what would you call, a musical thespian, or whatever the word is except you're doing it by way of music, and be able to express the human condition in all of its dimension. That's a great artist. This is what a great artist is supposed to try. If they want to be great, this is what you're supposed to strive for, with craft supporting it. You have it.